Security kicks out dirty mechanic, then learns he's the CEO of the car company. At the headquarters of Velocity Motors, which is widely considered to be among the most famous automobile manufacturers in the world, the morning was a cool and crisp Monday. A combination of cutting-edge technology and slick design could be seen on the huge campus, where staff were seen scurrying about in fitted suits and shoes that had been shined. Ambition and the aroma of freshly made coffee permeated the atmosphere. On the other hand, in the middle of this corporate paradise, a guy who was wearing overalls that were soiled with grease and a pair of work boots that were heavily worn was about to flip everything on its head. On that particular morning, the guy, whose name was Ethan Cole, had come at an early hour. He was not there to deliver a gift or service a vehicle. He was not there. He was present in order to observe. Ethan had a unique routine. Once a year, he would go covertly to one of Velocity's facilities and pretend to be a mechanic. He would do this without giving any prior notice. By doing so, he was able to maintain a connection to the ground realities of his firm and get insight into how things functioned while the CEO was absent. In this year, he decided to go with the flagship headquarters. A prototype engine that had been causing the engineering team difficulties had been the focus of Ethan's attention for the last hour, which he had spent in the parking garage tweaking with it. His face was covered with grime. His hands were streaked with oil, and his overalls seemed to have not been cleaned in weeks. His hands were blackened with oil. At first glance, he seemed to be no different from any other mechanic, and even more so, a dirty one. As he made his way into the main building, a security guard by the name of Greg, who was a no-nonsense former Marine with a keen eye for detail, saw him at that moment. For the last 5 years, Greg had been employed by Velocity, and he had always taken his work extremely seriously. The sight of a dirty technician making his way toward the executive wing was enough to send off alarm bells for him, since he took great pleasure in preserving the impeccable reputation of the corporation. "What's up, you?" Greg shouted out as he approached Ethan with a stride. "In what direction do you believe you are going?" Taking a little break, Ethan wiped his hands with a cloth. "I am just about to enter in. There is some work that has to be done by me." Greg seemed to narrow his eyes. "Do you own a badge that identifies you? Is there any permission to be at this location?" When Ethan felt his pockets, he saw that he had forgotten to take his badge with him to his workplace. "God, I must have forgotten about that. But don't worry about it, I work here." Greg was not persuaded either. "Yeah, you would be right. Listen up, buddy. This section is reserved only for high-level executives and VIPs. It is required that mechanics remain in either the service wing or the garage. There is no way that you can simply go about your day looking like that." He laughed out loud. "I get what you mean. I seem to be a complete wreck. Nevertheless, I assure you that I am intended to be here." The arms of Greg were crossed. "No matter what you promise, I won't take it. Rules are as they are. The only option left for you is to depart." Ethan realized that he was not going to prevail in this debate. He let out a sigh. "Let's get this over with. I'm going to leave. Should I at least be able to retrieve my tools from the inside?" The skull of Greg was shaken. "Oh, good effort. You are permitted to return if you have the appropriate permission. Until that time comes, you're not going to let yourself inside this building." During the time that Ethan was being led out of the building, a small crowd had formed, which included a few junior executives who immediately recognized him. Although they looked at one another nervously, they did not speak since they were unclear of how to respond to the circumstance. In the meanwhile, Greg went back to his work, content with the fact that he had completed his duties. After 1 hour, the whole organization was bustling with activity. There was an urgent meeting of all employees that the CEO had called. As they entered the theater, employees approached one another and whispered to one another. What could possibly be of such significance? Even though he was still wearing his grease-stained overalls, Ethan went onto the platform. There was complete silence in the room. Immediately after grabbing the microphone, he started speaking. "Hello, everyone, and good morning. It's possible that some of you are curious about the reason why I seem to have been struggling with a diesel engine the whole time. The fact of the matter is that I have. In addition, I am here to share with you the events that took place this morning." Greg was the recipient of his recounting of the event, during which he emphasized the security guard's commitment to his work. Greg was just acting in accordance with his own moral principles. He took action after seeing that someone was not a part of the group. That is something that I applaud him for. The color of Greg, who was standing at the rear of the room, changed to a bright golden red. He was completely unaware that the individual he had fired was the chief executive officer. After that, Ethan said, "However, this event brought to my attention something very significant. At Velocity, we take great satisfaction in our ability to innovate, achieve, and collaborate with one another. However, there are instances when we fail to recognize the individuals who are responsible for making everything possible. These individuals include the mechanics, technicians, and unsung heroes who ensure that our automobiles continue to function properly. It was brought to my attention today that regardless of how high we rise, we must never lose contact with the folks who are on the bottom." Round of applause broke out throughout the room. Following that, Ethan made an announcement on a new project, which was as follows: "Beginning today, every executive at Velocity will set aside 1 day per year to work alongside our mechanics and technicians. We are going to get our hands filthy, learn from the professionals, and keep in mind what has been the driving force behind this organization." Towards the end of the meeting, Greg approached Ethan, displaying a clear sign of nervousness. "I had no notion, Mr. Cole," I said. "Sorry, I'm very sorry." With a grin on his face, Ethan extended his hand. "To Greg, there is no need to apologize. You are only carrying out your duties. Specifically, I would want to make a promotion offer to you. I was wondering if you would be interested in leading a new initiative that aims to strengthen security standards across all of our places of business." Here was no words for Greg. At this point, I am at a loss for words. With a smile on his face, Ethan said, "Say yes, it is possible that the next time you should give the shady mechanic a chance." Like wildfire, the word of Ethan Cole's surprise visit and the ensuing all-hands meeting that he held went across the organization. The story was covered by several news sites, and hashtags such as Dirticio and Velocityvelus were trending on social media. Additionally, the stock price of the firm saw a little increase. On the other hand, Ethan experienced the most significant influence inside the confines of Velocity Motors. The new project, which was given the name Ground Level Day, was implemented throughout the whole organization. All employees, including executives, managers, and even interns, were obliged to spend a full day working alongside the manufacturing floor workers, technicians, and mechanics. Initially, there was considerable opposition to the idea. Although there were a few top executives who complained about wasting time or playing dress-up, Ethan was emphatic about his position. He was of the opinion that genuine leadership required an awareness of every aspect of the company, regardless of how untidy or unglamorous it may be. Remarkably, the outcomes were revolutionary. One of the first executives to take part in Ground Level Day was Sarah Mitchell, who was in charge of marketing at the time. Sarah had a reputation for wearing sharp clothes. She wore high heels, and her tone was even sharper. To say nothing of having ever handled a wrench, she had never even set foot in the garage. However, on the day that she was supposed to be working, She found herself working beneath the hood of a Velocity sports car, where she was instructed by a seasoned technician called Joe on how to change a fuel injector. At first, Sarah was unaccustomed to her surroundings. The tools were difficult for her to handle. She managed to get oil on her fancy shirt, and she even managed to drop a bolt into the engine compartment. As for Joe, he was patient. He walked her through the process, explaining not just the how, but also the why behind each step during the process. Sarah had not only changed the fuel injector by the time the day was over, but she had also developed a newfound appreciation for the technicians, who were responsible for keeping Velocity's vehicles in working order. In the course of the debriefing session, Sarah stated, "I had no idea how much skill and precision goes into this. It is simple to sit in a boardroom and discuss concepts such as brand value and customer experience, but experiencing these concepts directly is a very other experience." The experience that Sarah had motivated her to modify the marketing efforts that Velocity was doing. She began a series of advertisements that featured actual mechanics and technicians, showing their knowledge and devotion to their line of work. The campaign, which was given the name, "The Heart of Velocity," had a great deal of success with both the personnel and the consumers. While this was going on, Greg, the security guard who had been responsible for kicking out the dirty mechanic, was doing very well in his new position as the director of security procedures. It was via close collaboration with Ethan that he was able to design a security strategy that was more inclusive and empathic. As an alternative to strictly enforcing the regulations, Greg pushed his staff to first listen, ask questions, and get an understanding of the situation before taking any action. One day, Greg was sent a letter from a young mechanic called Carlos. Carlos had been moved by Ethan's tale, and he wanted to express his gratitude to Greg. Carlos wrote on how he had always felt that he was one of the cogs in the system at Velocity, and how he had always felt invisible there. On the other side, Charles had a revitalized feeling of pride in his profession after seeing the CEO getting his hands filthy. For the purpose of obtaining his engineering degree, he even began attending courses at night. The letter was read by Greg to Ethan, who was brought to tears by the content. According to Ethan, "This is precisely the reason why we are doing this. It is not enough to just comprehend one another. Rather, it is necessary to encourage and support one another." With the passage of time, Ground Level Day evolved into an essential component of Velocity's culture. As time went on, workers at all levels started to see one another not as titles or positions, but rather as colleagues who were working toward a standard objective, while the executives developed a greater awareness for the nuances of the company. The mechanics and technicians felt that they were acknowledged and heard. Additionally, the program had repercussions that extended beyond Velocity. Other businesses took note and started establishing programs that were quite similar to the one that was being implemented. During his time as a speaker at various conferences and seminars, Ethan was given the opportunity to discuss his idea of leading from the ground up. True leadership is not about being above the work. Rather, it is about being a part of it, he said emphatically. His message was simple but profound. Velocity Motors held its annual business gala 1 year after the horrific event that occurred the previous year. All of the attendees, with the exception of Ethan, were dressed to the nines for the event, which was a celebration of the accomplishments of the previous year. The grease-stained overalls that he had been wearing were once again on his body as he entered the stage to make his keynote address. A roar of laughter and applause erupted around the room. Before making his voice heard, Ethan waited for the cacophony to subside more. "I stood on this stage a year ago, wearing these same overalls, fresh from being kicked out of my own building," he said. "I was in the middle of that experience. That day was a defining moment, not just for myself, but for each and every one of us as well. It brought to our attention the fact that regardless of how successful we become, we must never lose sight of where we began working. After that, he proceeded to discuss the experiences of workers who had been influenced by ground-level day. These employees included the CEO who found a love for hands-on innovation, as well as the mechanic who converted into an engineer. Ethan said, "This is the true power that comes from having humility. It is not about bringing everything down to oneself. Rather, it is about bringing people up." In the last moments of his address, Ethan made an announcement about a new endeavor. He introduced the Velocity Foundation, which is a charitable organization that is committed to offering scholarships and training programs to young engineers and mechanics who come from marginalized regions. He explained his reasoning by saying, because the next great innovator might be out there right now, covered in grease and dreaming of something more. Not only did Velocity Motors become a worldwide leader in automotive innovation, but it also became a pioneer in corporate culture and social responsibility. This achievement occurred several years later. It is said that Ethan Cole, also known as the Grease-Stained CEO, became a legend, and his tale is now taught in business schools and told over campfires. Despite the fact that Greg had resigned from his position as head of security at Velocity, he continued to be Ethan's close friend and mentor. Greg would tease each other about that fateful day, saying things like, "You know, if I hadn't kicked you out, none of this would have happened." The two would often laugh about that day. In response, Ethan would just grin and say, "This is the best mistake you have ever made, my friend." As a result, the memory of the dirty mechanic continued to live on, serving as a reminder that sometimes the most profound teachings may be found in the most unexpected places. Feel free to share your thoughts in the comments and subscribe for more inspiring content.